right to life and liberty is not justiciable under emergency. Is that I think people have over the last 50 years, post emergency as well, know their power, their right to speak, their voice being. That is something people actually taught Mrs. Gandhi.
So do you think that confidence still exists?
I think that did exist, and we saw, for instance, in the parliament election, people did exercise their choice. That at the fundamental level, hatred cannot bind a nation for too long.
ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ವಿಶೇಷ ಅತಿಥಿ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಪ್ರಬೀರ್ ಪುರಕಾಯಸ್ಥ. ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರು ತಾವು ಕೇಳಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಅವರು ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ನ ಸಂಸ್ಥಾಪಕರು ಹೌದು, ಎಡಿಟರ್ ಇನ್ ಚೀಫ್ ಹೌದು, ಮತ್ತು ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಅನೇಕ ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳನ್ನ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ಅವರ ಪುಸ್ತಕದ ಕನ್ನಡದ ಅನುವಾದ ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಸಂಜೆ ಗಾಂಧಿ ಭವನದಲ್ಲಿ. ಆರದ ಹೋರಾಟದ ಕಿಚ್ಚು. ಮತ್ತು ಅವರು ಬಹಳ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋದು ದೆಹಲಿ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಫೋರಮ್ ಎಂಬ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ಸಂಸ್ಥಾಪಕರು ಹೌದು. ಅವರು ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಾವು ಮಾತನಾಡಿರ್ತೇವೆ. Thank you, sir. I'm so thankful that you are agreed to speak.
Pleasure to be with you.
Yes. We will start directly.
Yeah.
Like you have seen, like you once said that you born with India. Like India is as old as you are, and you have seen how India has come of age, and you have seen the emergency period, which was imposed in June 25, 1975. And you were arrested also. And also you've said in your writings that you've seen that, and this, what we are going through, is also kind of an emergency, undeclared emergency. So how would you compare both the times?
Well, there are similarities as well as differences. At that time, it was a formal emergency in the sense the government in fact declared that we did not have the right to move the courts for our civil liberties. Liberties existed, but they could not be enforced. So that was the famous judgment of the Supreme Court at that point of time.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸವಿಯಬೇಕೆನಿಸುವ ಮೃದುವಾದ ನಂದಿನಿ ಪನ್ನೀರ್.
That right to life and liberty is not justiciable under emergency. So that's where it stood. In fact, I still remember the question which somebody asked. I think one of the lawyers, I think the Attorney General, asked or answered. He said that it cannot be, yes, people have the right, but even a police constable can actually shoot a person and there is no legal redress. He didn't say that it was not a crime of the state against the person, but he also said that right exists but it cannot be exercised. So that was really the crux of the 1975 emergency and what the Supreme Court ruled. Of course, it was overthrown recently by one of the judgments. So we have at the moment the acceptance that the rights exist and you can enforce it through the courts. But the point again is that, as a number of people have argued, that the process itself can become a punishment. So the fact that people can be are charged with various offences, they're in for a large, could be for up to 6 years, 7 years before they even get bail. The case goes on for we don't know how long. So the process becomes a punishment rather than the official judgment of the court. So even that's where we are.
Charges are pressed even before the charge sheet has been. It takes years for that to this thing. We have so many cases.
So we can argue that this is something which we need to address, but the point is that addressing is not going to take place today. So that's a much longer addressal we are looking for. So that's one part of the emergency and today. The second part of it, I think, which is also what is different.
ನನಗಿಷ್ಟ ನಂದಿನಿ ತುಪ್ಪ, ಶುದ್ಧ ತುಪ್ಪ ಅಂದರೆ ನಂದಿನಿ.
Is that I think people have over the last 50 years, post emergency as well, know their power. Their power.
know their
the power of the people, their right to speak, their voice being heard, that is something people actually taught Mrs. Gandhi.
Yes.
That you may think that the state is supreme, but we as the people do constitute the state. And her rejection in the 1977 elections taught her that lesson.
Yes.
And in fact, the people voted her back to power because
Yes.
they were confident
Yes.
that she had learned the lesson, and which she indeed did, because she didn't really move in that direction, though she wasn't there for too long after the
Yes.
election victory. But given all of this, I think what is the last 50 years, 75 years after our independence, more than 75 years after our independence, what we have got is a confidence among the people that they can change their rulers.
So do you think that confidence still exists?
I think that did exist, and we saw, for instance, in the parliament election,
Yes.
people did exercise their choice. There are, of course, various issues that are there in democracy, both ours and other places around the world, that money power plays a role.
Yes.
If you are already in government, you're an incumbent party, then of course that plays a role.
Yes.
But in spite of all of this, I think people's ability to be heard is still universal in the world. And that's what distinguishes, shall we say, the medieval period from what is today. What distinguishes the colonial period from today. That if we could get rid of emergency, if you could get rid of the British colonial rule, then the people feel today, having done this in different parts of the world, they feel today that they have the ability to change their rulers. And I think that is the confidence that I have in the people. May not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, but I think for the long run, that is what ultimately protects democracy.
So, but there is some people have said, and we have seen that that emergency, 1975 emergency, was not supported by the people. It was enforced, dictatorial way in a way. But
I disagree with that.
Okay.
I think initially there was an acceptance of the emergency, and if you remember, the South voted in favor of Mrs. Gandhi.
Yes.
So you can argue that
Yes.
North rejected emergency, but the South didn't. But so therefore, it is not that easy to say that what really was the rejection. But definitely what is called the emergency excesses really spelt the end of at least the defeat of the Congress in North India after the emergency.
Yes.
But I'm going to say that ultimately the issue really is, even then, a section of the people supported the emergency. When it was declared, the resistance to the emergency was not as widespread as you might think it was. It is also true that as one of the peasant farmer leaders or one of the farmers in some stray interview said, when the police constable, the daroga, not even the constable, daroga, is much more powerful than the panchayat leader, then we have to think. And therefore, for us, democracy is the panchayat leader should be more powerful than the police, the daroga. So I think that sums up to me what the emergency was all about.
ನನ್ನ ಫೇವರೇಟ್ ನಂದಿನಿ ಚೀಸ್.
ಈಗ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಫೇವರೇಟ್ ನಂದಿನಿ ಚೀಸ್.
That was now after the 2014 elections and all that. So of course we do agree that in 75 also some people did reject, North India rejected, South India did not reject electorally. That we can agree upon. Yet there is a feeling that the undeclared emergency, kind of emergency, is being supported by people. It is kind of, we wanted it, the society wanted it. There are arguments like that. So
let's I think that's an important question, that unlike the 1975 emergency, which did not have grassroots mobilization of the kind that we are seeing today.
Yes.
And that mobilization today that we are seeing is also divisive.
Yes.
It's in terms of language, for instance, it's very clear the kind of Hindi chauvinism that is there in a section of the people. Then it is, of course, religious identity politics is what I would call it, what is otherwise called communal politics. All that is there. And the fact is that the BJP is supported by the organized force.
Yes.
The RSS has been has a long history of being an organized political force. They don't say they're a political party. The reason is, of course, the BJP could argue is the political arm of the RSS.
Yes.
But it's in the garb of social movement is what they would otherwise term themselves. They're really a political organization in the sense they would like to transform India from a republic of all its people to something which is a Hindu nation.
Yes.
And I think that battle continues. But you know, again, this kind of politics, I believe, has always had a sway, and it also has a resistance. And that is the where we have to play our role. The people of the country. I'm not going to say we meaning I, you, or so on. The people of the country, and I do believe that at the fundamental level, you know, hatred cannot bind a nation for too long. And therefore, when you talk of religious divisions, this is the attempt to make hate politics win over politics of solidarity. And I believe solidarity in human beings is more fundamental than hatred. And I do believe that is why nations which have tried to build on ethnic, religious or other identities cannot bind the nation for too long, because the ultimate question comes, can you give the people a decent life? And that is the fundamental proposition, which in the long term I think always wins out.
So you said like that I'm picking up that phrase, like we have a role to play. So can you tell about that? Like in this situation, what is the role that as a society, as a concerned citizen, like what is the role that we need to play now?
Well, I think this is a question that each person, each movement, each section, each linguistic identity, all of us have to answer in different ways. There is no one answer. And I think it's a collective set of answers that we are seeking. And how do we build a solidarity amongst the various answers that we can present? I think that's what really is the kind of politics we need today, which can build what used to be our slogan, if you remember, unity in our diversities. And this diversity is not just language, not religion, but it is also basically our political diversity as well as a different kind of sections of working people whose interests have to be protected, who may appear to conflict with each other, but how do you reconcile that this interest is really not, the conflict is not between us, but between big capital, extremely wealthy people, because we can see the polarization in terms of wealth and money power today that is taking place, and the larger sections of the people. So I think, yes, we have a difficult task, but whoever said the task of nation building is going to be an easy one?
Yes, definitely. So I would like to come back to it, but like I have some questions about the NewsClick. When you started it, like what were your idea? What did you think? What were the objectives and the road traveled, the years, the decade? So how do you see that journey?
Well, you know, I would put it very simply.
ಪರಿಶುದ್ಧ ನಂದಿನಿ ಹಾಲಿನಿಂದ ತಯಾರಿಸಿದ ನೈಜ ನಂದಿನಿ ಐಸ್ ಕ್ರೀಮ್ಸ್.
My attempt as an engineer, as you know, I've been a professional engineer all my life, was to say technology is changing communications, and we who claim to be progressive, we also need to be progressive in the sense of understanding where technology is going and using it for our work. In this process, I had set up NewsClick initially as a very small example, and at the time, this is 2009, to show that technology can be used by a small group of people as well, and this is what we need to democratize. That was really the understanding. But unfortunately, a lot of my friends thought Facebook was the answer. You know, later on they may think Twitter is the answer,
Yes.
but they or YouTube is the answer. So YouTube is a platform we also use. So the question for them wasn't that they needed an organized intervention, that those who are in some kind of movements need organized intervention and make it a part of their movement. Instead of this, they made it into a question of self-expression,
Yes.
which is what really is the dominant theme in the social media,
Yes.
what I call becoming influencers themselves,
Yes.
but not as an adjunct or as a part of a larger social movement process.
Yes.
And I think that's the challenge which I was trying to address. But in the process, NewsClick became bigger. Yes, we got some support
Yes.
and other things. But for me, it was still an experiment of how new technologies can be used for the purpose of a larger social churning process, if you will, and process of change, if you will. So I'm happy NewsClick played the role it did.
So this is what, like, I'm just curious, like, what is the role that it played, and how happy, like, there were obviously you had some objective about technology, and you are a political person, and were the objectives met, or did you see the effect of your work on the politics, on the society?
Well, you know, these are answers that would be self-serving if I say yes and so on. I think these are all processes. And what we did as NewsClick, I think made an impact. A lot of other people, I think, did see NewsClick, but that's not what I consider success. Success is how many people learned that, yes, these kind of platforms can be built and we can be a part of that. And I think that is really the democratization of media space.
Yes.
Have I succeeded in doing that? Not by NewsClick, but have I succeeded in helping that process to unfold further?
Yes.
And that's an answer which all of you have to give.
Yes.
And
So
I
it is
do
a
think,
process.
yeah,
It is-
and I
cannot
do
be an-
think, yes, that with or without NewsClick would have happened anyway. But did we facilitate, did we help, did we disseminate amongst a set of progressive people a certain set of beliefs that it
Yes.
could be done? And I think those are the positives that I take away from the NewsClick experiment. Whether NewsClick survives or it doesn't, you know, we are too small to buck the government in that sense. If they want to shut us down in different ways, they can. But the real issue is that, did the experiment that we were trying to do, did it have an impact? And I think it did.
So you are also a founder of Delhi Social Forum.
Science Forum.
Delhi Science Forum.
One of the founder members.
Yes. So before coming to that, like, we spoke about, like, the how to use the technology and the knowledge. So you've spoken about privatization of knowledge. So can you just tell our viewers, what do you mean by that privatization of knowledge, and how it is affecting us in a simple terms?
It's a very simple issue, really.
Hmm.
That I do believe that science is not individual, it's social.
Okay.
Social in the sense that no person by themselves develops science the way we think it has developed. Let's take, for instance, the case of Galileo, his most famous example. Galileo would not have had the telescope without the lens. Lens was developed by somebody who was very small, unknown figure called Leeuwenhoek in, I think, Holland. And he used to grind lenses, and he could see things which, you know, germs, or what he thought were some living insects, which are very small. He could see them through his lens. And then lens became something which could be used together to make a telescope.
Yes.
Without the telescope, there was no Galileo.
Yes.
And Galileo did not buy telescopes like you can do today. He had to grind his own lens and also actually develop or build the telescope, or it was built by craftsmen under his direction.
Yes.
So science in that sense was also about developing tools of inquiry.
Tools of inquiry.
Inquiry.
Yes.
And these are physical tools. I'm not
Yes.
talking of mental tools.
Yes.
Because when you think of science, we think of only as if it's a mental development. No. It's as much a development of the tools of science, which is really technology, and of course the theories of nature, which is what we think science is.
Yes.
And they go together. And this connection is what people miss when we talk about the history of science. The telescope and the microscope has really built what we think of the modern world. Okay, can you think of the modern world without telescope, without microscope? And then you start thinking, okay, what is modern physics if these things did not exist? And of course we can take it to the Hadron Collider, we can take it about the new telescopes which are being built, which some of them are now rotating in the skies. So all of that, if you take, you will see that science is as much about building instruments of inquiry, which is technology, which may or may not come from directly from the need for experiments, may come from something else. Take, for instance, the great thing about artificial intelligence. We know it's built on, say, chips. Okay, without the NVIDIA chips, would we have the advances we see in artificial intelligence, which is why the chip wars are taking place right now. But for instance, the extreme ultraviolet lithography, which is what is used to develop the chips, the nanometer level chips, 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer, now 2 or 3 nanometer level chips are being developed. Without that, would we have all of these advances? And then we find, okay, this is lithographic machines. Lithographic machines are using laser for essentially etching very thin lines on basically silicon. Now, if that is what is advancing science, artificial intelligence, whatever we are calling it now, this is also a product of technology, which in turn is also the product of science. So all of this go together. So you cannot think of science and technology as really two independent disciplines, because they're so closely connected. But at the same time, they're different ventures. One is understanding nature, one is changing nature, which is what Didi Kosambi said. You know, this is basically the difference between the two. And I think that is the fundamental way that we need to understand that science does not develop with lone scientists. Today, the hundreds, thousands of scientists who come together for science. We can go into some of the major development, the Hadron Collider, the black hole event horizon experiment, or not experiment really, it's happening. But to find, looking at it, all this have hundreds, thousands of people who are actually co-authors of these papers. So it's a collective industrial scale science we are talking about. When you talk about the instrument, there are industrial scale developments, leading cutting edge technology which is being developed for the purpose as well, and that feeds back into knowledge of how to develop new tools. So I think this is where I think we need to think about science and technology very differently from the way we normally think of it.
Very interesting how we relate science and technology. For a layman it is, tab sab kuch to ek hi hai. Yeah, but like there is another thing that I want to connect with science and politics, because like a lot of problems that we are facing, like be it global warming, climate change, all those things, like the crisis that we are facing, water crisis or ecological crisis, like we can club it. Generally we can say that like science also. So can we make these issues as political issues? Like how do we connect this to politics?
You had asked actually the question in the earlier form as well, which I didn't fully answer. I must answer this. Ultimately, big science, big technology is about money.
Yes.
And question is, in whose interest should society spend that money?
Yes.
When we do any of these experiments that I talked about, the advances required also mean huge expenditures, which is social expenditures. So question is, who wants certain developments to take place, who funds it, and who gets the benefit of it?
Yes.
And if you come down to it, the question is, this huge expenditure, for instance, which has led to the ASML machine, was funded by essentially the state. And because it was funded by the state, ultimately the state decides who benefits. And unfortunately, if you see the way it is structured, it's for the benefit of a small set of companies or a small set of people, which is what the capitalist class is all about. So effectively, the social investment that we have made in science and technology leads finally into what's called the patent system, which means that it is owned by companies. Even if it is owned by public research laboratories, the patents are given to big capitalists or capitalist companies, who in turn then have a monopoly over these technologies. And that is what leads ultimately to super profits, the expansion of capital at the expense of the people. So the questions in science and technology, if you are asking the fundamental question, who benefits from it, is it depends on the social structure you have, and if all the social investment that is made, the social capital that is invested in advancing science and technology goes to benefit a few capitalists or a few capitalist, monopoly capitalist companies, then this is the state in the service of capital. And that's what we need to really completely restructure for it to benefit people. Exactly. This is the foundation of the people's science movement.
Yes.
Science for the people. Science and technology, I would say, for the people. This is the reason that we have this huge movement globally now for the commons. That this belongs to commons. It is, of course, most sharply enunciated in software. Free software movement comes from this source, that all software should be put in the commons. And that has become very powerful because it's been accepted now by even multinational companies and even by the biggest ones like Microsoft, that free software produces far better quality software than what private companies, monopoly capital is able to do.
Yeah. So before coming to the ecology point, like as we are at free software movement, can you tell us, our viewers, what exactly is free software? Because we don't know the software, we don't know we just get the apps or the applications or exe file and we start using it. We do not know coding, we do not know what goes behind it. So can you tell us, like, what does it mean? Like, what is free software?
Well, there are two major intellectual property right issues in the world. One is when you patent something.
Yes.
Okay. Now, patents means that you have a monopoly by virtue of saying that I am the first discoverer of this. Free software is the code you write.
The code I write.
You write, whether it is owned by person under what is called copyright, it's not patent, copyright, or can it be made available to the public. And for that, some very clever lawyers and software people got together to propose a license by which it is copyrighted, but copyrighted in a particular way, which says that I own the copyright, but you can use it whichever way you want, change it as well. But if you use my software and produce a derivative of that by changing some of it, then that has to be released under the same license I am giving it to you, which is what is called the copyleft license. But it is different for permissive ways of giving license. Because it's a copyright, so I have the right to do it. Okay, because I have copyrighted it, I have the right to do it. And therefore, this is sometimes called viral license. That it's the minute you touch it, use it, you have to use it under the same license. And therefore, we can protect the open nature of the software that you have written in this particular way. It cannot be privatized easily. It's protected under the laws of capitalism, which is copyright. Okay, so that is a very clever move that, as I said, Richard Stallman is one of the founders of this, plus his they were close set of colleagues, Eben Moglen, for instance, a very good historian come lawyer who wrote on these issues, and he was instrumental in devising also in advancing, shall we say, the copyleft licensing. So all of this is how code can therefore remain open. It cannot be privatized. Unlike patent, by some extension, I can then say, this is something new, I make this patent which is entirely mine. So that cannot be done. And in fact, we had lots of discussions, can we have an equivalent in terms of patents in the science domain? And the answer still is that it is not possible to do in patenting what has been done in the case of software. That equivalent licenses don't exist. But yes, open source science, that making it open, letting everybody share the developments, particularly in biology and so on. There are various projects which do what would be called partial protection of retaining it within the larger commons, but it is not as strong as, for instance, the software community can do by virtue of the copyright as a intellectual property right. I'm not going into details of all of this because it becomes too technical. But the simple point is, free software movement can protect itself. There is no such protection for a free science movement. Therefore, the science movement's task is in that sense legally more difficult, but politically, since its big science is really done by the state, it is possible to argue the state should own the products and make it available to the people at a nominal cost. So all those things then become really at the end of it political. And this is the fundamental issue that I would like to place, that all these issues finally boils down to what kind of politics do you believe in? Do you believe in the politics of few people should own the riches of the world, including intellectual knowledge, or should it belong to the people? And this is the fundamental battle in the world today.
Yes. So, like coming back to this fundamental question, should it belong to just few people? So what we are seeing is in Bangalore and a lot of places, we are facing a lot of crisis, water crisis, the ecology crisis, like there are floods, and there are a lot many, like we all know. But there is a feeling of the few people, or like we can manage, like there is no oxygen in the pollutant, like we'll have some oxygen cylinder at home or something we will do, or we'll roam in AC car, or we'll protect ourselves, like the individuals, the very few. So that feeling is not just restricted to those just people. There are other people also who are aspiring to be there. So in such a situation, my concern is, how do we make these things as core issues, like global warming or climate change, or like the floods? We are like, pollution is a real issue. Is it possible for us to make this a core issue, or we will be swayed by the interest of few people? Or like, if you want to, like, what can we do?
Well, you have to believe in the people, whether it's politics or it's economics, whether it is capital or it is ecology. So yes, I believe in that. It's really something that it's really the larger failure that we have today, that society is moving away from what would be called larger social solutions into individual solutions.
Larger social solutions into individual solutions. Yes.
But this is what you really are talking about.
Yes.
Can we withdraw from the world and protect ourselves? And the answer is obviously no. Nobody can. Okay. But there is a belief, if you're like Elon Musk, that maybe you can migrate to Mars.
Yes.
Okay. Now those are the kind of solutions that they're looking for. But if you really look at you and me, and we are not exactly the underprivileged, at least I'm not. So we can't. So forget about being Elon Musk's. You can't be rich and protect yourself also today. So given that, how do we build? I would not attempt to answer the question, why should we do X or Y or this? I really answer the question how we should do it.
Yes.
Well, relate the issues of the people to the larger issues. And climate change is one of the things which a lot of people would like to reduce it to green versus X, Y, Z. That we need to be green, as if individual being green is good enough.
Yes.
Without understanding that it's, or without, I will not say without understanding, but they understand it fully. Without really addressing the core issue.
Yes.
That if you want to talk about essentially greenhouse gases, you have to talk about energy. And energy today can be produced much more cheaply, as we know, through solar and wind. So why are we doing so much of coal, oil and so on? And why is, for instance, the United States, which has never accepted, essentially once or twice it comes into the global compacts, treaties, and then withdraws from it. But fundamentally it is refused, says that our lifestyle is not open to the global compact. We will do it whatever we need to do for ourselves, and we'll burn fossil fuels, the hell with the world. Now, those things are what we are really battling, because now it's clear that solar energy, wind energy can be produced much more cheaply than fossil fuel, can be produced much more cheaply than nuclear. So why are we then not looking at collective solutions and thinking we'll secede from the world, which we can't?
Yes.
Maybe for a small period of time, yes. Maybe for a few people, yes, but not for a long time. And I think these are the questions that I was addressing earlier also.
Yes.
We have to look at larger societal solutions, not individual solutions, because individual solutions cannot save the world, and if the world is not saved, you are not going to survive either.
Yes.
I think that's the fundamental issue that we have to address, and that's what brings all of this together.
Yes, exactly. So that's like, so sometimes I feel, sometimes I argue is, okay, fascism is there, undeclared emergency. To fight that, like, we have to use these. Like ecology, we can't, we have to like make this an issue.
This also an issue.
This also, yes.
I would always say it's an and, not an or.
So the title of your book in Kannada is Arada Horatada Kichu. I don't know how to translate it. Like
I don't know what it means.
Okay, it's beautiful. The title is beautiful, and it means
struggle.
Yes, it means what your life. And
I believe Purata is struggle, right?
Horata is struggle.
Purata is struggle.
Kichu is kindle.
Kindle.
So, okay, last question is, your biography means Arada Horatada Kichu. So, are you still optimistic about the society future?
I'm always optimistic. Okay, I'm always optimistic because I do believe that the collective energy of the people and the collective struggle of the people will succeed.
Yes.
Question is how long it will take, whether I'll be there or not, which is irrelevant to the larger issue at hand.
Yes. Thank you, sir. So with this optimism, this is a lesson for all of us. Like, primarily we have to be optimistic and use a lot of other things, diverse things, and we shall see you in the evening also. Okay, good luck for this, and thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yes, it is my pleasure.
ಮತ್ತಷ್ಟು ವಿಶೇಷ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡಲು ಮತ್ತು ಹೊಸ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳಿಯಲು
ಇದೀನ.com ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಚಾನೆಲ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮತ್ತು ಬೆಲ್ ಐಕಾನ್ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ.